Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm going to just talk as kind of directly as possible on this topic. And keep in mind, this is my opinion. It's not yours. It doesn't need to be yours. And it's fine. This is kind of my unique position. It's just how I feel. I talk to a lot of different people. I see the phrase, we need to go back a lot. I've seen it talked about on videos a ton when it comes to comics. We need to go back with this idea that comics were better in the 80s and 90s and we went astray. So we've got to get back to that time period. Um, this isn't me arguing with that. In fact, I mean, I've been putting out videos. I've tried to wear my opinions on my sleeve. I like the 80s. That's my favorite era. I was much less fond of the 90s. Some of that was because I didn't think the comic content was as good, but at the same time, I was reading Doom Patrol and loving it and lots of other books during that era. So it's not like it's all bad. There was less. And that also corresponded to a giant, market seizure in the comic book industry and a lot of very terrible decisions that took a ton of stores out. Life got harder in the late 90s. Um, but, obviously I like that time period. For me, it's not we need to go back. It is we need to it's half of that. There's a lot of lessons, there's a lot of things that were done in the 80s that worked. And there is this desire inside comics that I just don't get. That is we cannot do things that were done before. We cannot, if that was something that was done in the 80s, it's by definition bad, it's by definition antique. And I'm not even talking about the culture war stuff. I'm talking about kind of even opinions that publishers and editors have had. Do you know how many meetings I've been in or dinners, not meetings, dinners, drinks, those kinds of things. Some meetings, some comic retailer summits and things, where the comment of, well, we can't use Ron Lim. His style is dated. He's just his old. I have heard that applied to a ton of artists, from Art Adams, certainly Ron Lim a number of times, George Perez, John Byrne a lot. His stuff is dated. And I find that comment so profoundly backwards, wrong, stupid, ignorant. I mean, every word you want to put at it. I find it terrible. And I hate that attitude. I absolutely despise it. I find myself at a crossroads a lot of time between the various factions of the culture war, and it's more eye rolling than anything else. But it's like these artists are great. Obviously, in some cases, the people have aged and they don't have the same precision, maybe, or maybe they're kind of out of practice. George Perez has some sight, vision, some problems with seeing, which is going to be a barrier. You're not going to have George Perez cranking out 4 books a month like he used to. But their style isn't dated. Their style is relevant today. And here's the part that just infuriates me about the whole argument is if you go to Amazon, if you go to bookstores and you look at trades, what do you see there? Old Dave Gibbons is still selling plenty of books with Watchmen. And that title, I hear all the time that the art's dated. John Byrne's Dark Phoenix saga sells constantly. His Man of Steel omnibus that DC just put out is doing better than than almost anything else they're publishing. Three Jokers is up there, but it's certainly doing better than others. And how can that, if the stuff is dated, why is it that these titles year in year out hold their value, sell well, people go for them, and they're what is paying the bills in the companies in a lot of cases is these old dated art styles, which are anything but. I also think that a lot of the business practices, I will tell you as a retailer, it was better in the 90s. Not the terrible part. That statement I just made can be taken out of context. But the outreach, particularly from DC, was better in the 90s. The cross marketing opportunities, the co-branding things that used to happen, it was better. There seemed to be at least more interest from the indies and from DC and from Marvel into what was selling at the retail shop back in the 90s and even the early 2000s. It's really over the last 15 years that the big publishers seem to be largely separating themselves away from the retailers. They seem to be ignoring the channel. And if, we're seeing titles selling great, and the fact they kind of got the model down and they knew what was going to work and what wasn't and everything else, then I wouldn't care. I think every business should optimize and get to the point where you don't need to spend so much time in the field kind of figuring out what's going on. Hopefully eventually you'll learn that lesson, and you'll optimize and start to tune to it, and you can do less of it. But that's not what's happening. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of titles that do not sell, a lot of things that are dead on arrival, a lot of variant schemes and incentive schemes that go out to retailers that just are our frustration point for comics. There's very little outreach. And to that point, there are a handful of people, some of the names I've mentioned on the show, some people who have been guests. I mean, I get Jeff Thorne, writer of Green Lantern, regularly asks about what's going on in the comic shop. He's curious. He wants to know what's selling. He's curious about how things are going. He wants to help. A lot of the people that I've talked to on this, have a vested interest in trying to, connect and do well. There's been a lot of efforts I've done behind the scenes that I don't talk about. I'm not sure I can talk about. Actually, I should ask if I could talk about it or not, because there's a lot of goodwill being done by a lot of people, Marvel, DC, others, as individual efforts to reach out to comic shops. And that reminds me of what it was like, close to 30 years ago. In that respect, yeah, we need to go back, or maybe put better, we need to just bring those good habits forward. There is, it just, I hate to see comics be what it's become, which feels very defeatist. It feels very auxiliary. It feels very much like, nobody really believes this can be a big business. Nobody really believes it matters. It's like, whenever I hear somebody who works within comics talk about how, well, video games and phones and apps and things, those are far more powerful than comics. So I mean, how can we compete against that? I always think you should get out, like get out of comics and get somebody in there who actually cares about the medium and believes it can be pushed forward and believes in the strength of it, because the strength exists. I don't know how many videos, it's like 500 videos that I've put out at this point talking about, here's what's selling in Europe, here's what's selling in Japan, here's the techniques they're using, here are obvious things that would make the product better. And look, you see the market's responding. Asterix does incredible over in Europe whenever it's put out. There's at this point so many titles in Japan that are blowing up and doing great that you can't even just list one anymore. There's lots. The migration of that content over here is doing great. So we know that it's possible. We know that this business can be strong, can be relevant, can bring money and audience in. So why do we have to pretend like the battle is over before we begun? That's the part that makes me crazy. And make no mistake about it, probably one of the reasons why I can't quite get comfortable with the idea of we need to go back as just a general statement is because there were a lot of stupid things that happened back in the day. There were plenty of dumb mistakes. There was a lot of kind of very goofy decisions being made. You've heard some of the interviews where, an editor goes to Bill Loebs and says, hey, for Wonder Woman, why don't we just kill off all the supporting cast and make her edgy and evil? Like that's a terrible idea. Why would you suggest that? But so this isn't changed. That's something that they do today. That's the short-sighted kind of dumb thinking. But there were a lot of good elements. As I mentioned, there were artists, there were writers, there were people who could craft great stories. I mean, many of the stories that really sold the idea of superheroism and what it meant for sacrifice and I gave that comparison to the William Messner Loeb story, Nobody Dies, out of The Flash. That remains to this day an incredible story, and it's one issue. It's just one comic, and it nails heroism and why Wally West is such a hero better than a lot of comics that spend 12 issues or more deconstructing characters to do it. I mean, I would argue you could take Bendis's entire run of Superman and hold it up against that one single issue of The Flash, and one nails what it means to be a hero, and the other one is kind of all over the place in terms of where it lands in the end. I think that there's lessons to be learned there, and there's talent. So in that respect, I don't, and I'm not taking the comment literally. I understand the spirit of what I think a lot of people say when they say we need to go back is the same thing I'm saying. We just need to preserve the pieces that worked. If we've ignored those lessons, let's refresh ourselves in them. Let's get things to the point where we're back on track. Maybe that's the way I would say it. We've got to get back on track. The train has gone off the track. It's wildly pummeling through tumbleweeds and dust at this point. And you've got a ton of people. Here's the most insane part. You have people inside the comic industry, many of them, who are maybe doing good efforts. I mentioned Jeff Thorne. That just doesn't mean people have to like his book. Maybe you don't like the direction of his book, but his desire to reach out to fans, to understand what customers are doing, to talk to shops is good. I've talked to Sean Murphy. Sean Murphy is always curious. What's going on in the shop? What's going on the street? How are people responding to things? Do you think this would be a good idea? We should do this. This would be good for people, good for customers. They feel like they're getting a little extra. Lots of people I can mention. They're out there. There are plenty of people, more than you think, in comics who want to do the right thing. Maybe they're not producing the stories that you like. That's okay. They don't all have to. But if their heart's in the right place, that's good. That's way better than the screeching mob of lunatics who are often just spending their time on social media wanting to engage in this bizarre war with customers. Those people have to be shaken out of this industry. They have to go. There is not a place for them. Like, on the other end, there are tons of fans and customers who, despite the fact that comics are moving up to $4, $5 or more for just a floppy, are still willing to shell out that money. They're still willing to support it. They're on board. Look at all the people who came back to the X-Men when House of X Powers of 10 came out. These were people who felt burned by a lot of the things that the X universe was doing. And yet, if there was a story out there, they were quick to support it. We've seen a lot of people. I mean, I think we have to stop looking at at passionate fans as being somehow evil, wrong, and avoided. Definitely, there's people who go too far, no doubt about it. But what I see is a lot of people at the retailer level, at the creator level, and at the fan level who all want in. They all want to do the right thing. They all want to grow comics. There's quite a large number. I would argue there's more of them than there are of the others. What we need to do is stop giving the others, the people who are in this as a hobby, who believe that the battle's already over and that the industry is just winding down and screw it, that this is basically a platform to get a very small amount of celebrity so you can then attack other people with it. Those people have to be chased out. We have to stop giving those people a megaphone because they're not helping anything. They're not preserving the space. They're not adding value. All they're doing is basically they moved in to this industry, and they're chasing people out of it. Now, notice I'm being very careful. There are lots of people who are left wing, right wing, who are great people who are helping this industry. Absolutely. I think the thing that I wish people would do, especially I know lots of people who comment on these videos, we have to start taking the politics out of it. And I know all the arguments against it. I know already. Trust me, I'm not an idiot. I know. But that is a distraction. I am absolutely convinced that the lunatic, mentally ill people who scream about comics and try and get people out of it and want to chase and cancel and just basically wreck everything. If it was fashionable for them to be right wing, they absolutely would. The politics are irrelevant to them. This is the goal and the desire there is to simply have a platform, use it to attack people. Where they're coming from doesn't matter. In fact, several of them switch parties when it's convenient. Many of them were right wing 10 years ago. Now suddenly, magically, they're left because that's where you get attention and you can get a little army for yourself on Twitter. The politics are it's like a coat. They're putting it on, taking it off when it's convenient to them. The key here is that they're not adding value. They are not bringing good things to comics. And there are people who are fans. There are people who are, creators. There are people who are retailers who fit this mold, who are basically, they've already given up. And so the only entertainment they're going to get out of this is entertainment for themselves. Those people are selfish. They've got to go. But we need to take a harder look at the people who are actually trying to help, because there's a ton of them. They're out there today, and they come from all different walks of life. And if we allow kind of this phony tribalism to separate that group, then we are in trouble. Because the reality is, as I've said before, if there's a comic that can be an indie, a comic aimed at a completely different audience, but they can find that audience, they can sell it, they can bring money in, and they can strengthen the business, they should do that. Absolutely. I don't want all comics to be the same. I'd like them all to be very different. I'd like a comic for everyone. I love comics, and comics is strongest when there's a wide variety. Yes, a wide diversity of comics out there. It's better for comics. The diversity is not the problem. It's the lunatics who are in making some of them. Those people are the problem. Those people do not care about any of this. All they care about is a tiny bit of attention, and just that's it. Again, you talk to a lot of these people, you look at their Twitter feeds, they talk about things like how comics are, unimportant. The people making them and the people professing to be big fans, they talk about how the battle's already over, and iPads are more popular and all. Like, these are not the people we want. I don't know. It's a weird. I'm just trying to kind of speak from my heart a bit. I don't want to go back. I want to I want to bring the good elements forward. I want to recognize the people who are trying really hard from all the different ways that they are, whether it's mainstream, indie, crowdfunding, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of people out there who are trying very hard to be productive and to put content out and do good things. Let's hold those people up. Those are the normies. That's where the business is centered. That's where we should be. Anyway, enough about this. We'll talk more comics. But please, if you're coming in to want to explain to me why the leftist ideology is the true culprit and problem here, please, I've heard it before. You're welcome to your own opinion. I don't need to hear it again. I get it. That is not. I think that's a distraction. I really do. I understand you feel passionately the other way. That's cool. You're welcome to it, but it's a complete distraction to me. The people who are making the biggest mess in this industry, the politics it's an illusion. It's a mask. It's a costume. They're just using it to kind of further them being lunatics. Let's focus on the crazy part. All right. Thank you for listening.